The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome back to the Formed Book Club, or welcome if you're a first-time listener or viewer. We are going to continue discussing G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. We are on chapter 2, the maniac, and since Joseph is kind of a specialist in this, I thought we'd let him start it off.
Yeah, if you want to start with the maniac, start with me, Father. This chapter basically talks about the maniac is the person who believes he's God, effectively, right? Pride is the mania, making ourselves God of our own microcosmos. So it begins here, the first sentence: thoroughly worldly people never understand even the world. They rely altogether on a few cynical maxims which are not true. So, the foundations are based upon truisms which are not true. And then he gives an example. That man will get on. He believes in himself. All right. Now, of course, we have to define things here. Self-confidence is important. If you have no self-confidence at all, you will do nothing. But this believes in himself is I think the manic egocentrism of the narcissist, right? That all truth basically is something which I decide. Nobody has a right to inform me or tell me what is true. I make that choice, right? This radical pride, making up self-deification. And so he says at the bottom here, it would be bottom of the page, towards the bottom of the page. It would be much truer to say that a man will certainly fail because he believes in himself. Complete self-confidence is not merely a sin. Complete self-confidence is a weakness. So this sort of complete self-confidence, not good, prudent, temperate, virtuous self-confidence, complete, absolute, prideful self-confidence is egocentrism, making ourselves the center of the universe, making ourselves God, and we're worshipping a false God ourselves. And that, of course, is not just idolatry, but the fundamental weakness which prevents us from understanding anything else.
Mm-hmm. And then interesting how he moves from that to a discussion of sin, because, of course, if any man who's honest with himself knows that he's got that problem. And what I love here is that here the modern man gets rid of sin, a fact as practical as potatoes, he says on page 19, and then goes on, whether or no man could be washed in miraculous waters, there was no doubt at any rate that he wanted washing. Right? So he's starting with the most fundamental, what should be the most fundamental, obvious fact about mankind is that we're a fallen race. And so this hubris of the man who believes in himself, meaning believes he's just perfect the way he is and doesn't have any need for a baptism or for a creed or for a church or whatever. Yes, he's setting up an interesting...
Sorry.
No, that's right. Go on.
Yeah, and to contextualize that, I've got in the margin there original sin, and I mentioned Rousseau, etc. Of course, he didn't believe in original sin; they believed the noble savage. But I'm actually currently teaching a course for high schoolers for Homeschool Connections on Bede and Beowulf, and because Beowulf is about the much earlier heresy of Pelagius, right, which I think is the 3rd century, so very, very early. And that's based, Pelagius did not believe in original sin, right? Pelagius believed that basically we're naturally good. All we have to do is listen to what Jesus said and do it. We don't need grace, we don't need sacraments, we don't need church, right? So this radical self-belief, which Chesterton calls madness, goes right back to the earliest days of the church.
And following on from what you quoted, Vivian, on page 19, about he wanted washing, we need washing. But certain religious leaders in London, not mere materialists, have begun in our day not to deny the highly disputable water, that is to say, baptism and supernatural life, but to deny the indisputable dirt. Certain new theologians dispute original sin, which is the only part of Christian theology which can really be proved.
Right. They essentially deny human sin, which they can see in the street. This is just... Right away, this kind of repartee that he sets up is so, first of all, it's fun.
Yeah.
This makes for fun reading. He makes you laugh. He makes you laugh at yourself to the degree that you fall even in the slightest bit for any of this kind of nonsense.
See, with me, I mean, I was not a Christian, but I fell in love with Chesterton because of who he is, and we see who he is, the way he expresses himself here, the goodness of the man, and so and of course Dale Ahlquist and Ignatius Press published a book called The Apostle of Common Sense by Dale Ahlquist about Chesterton, and you know that I think is a good title for him. He is the Apostle of Common Sense. He shows the absurdity of some of these ideas, right? That really it's just like pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. These modern philosophies ultimately are naked when you look at them through the just simple wisdom of common sense.
And he juxtaposes common sense with the elite view of things that it's so, incompatible that it makes you laugh. And at the beginning of every class, which I've taught using Chesterton in any form, I say, I will judge your comprehension by how many times you laugh while you're reading this. And I say, and I will try and help you to understand enough to laugh, because people read this thing, they don't get it, They don't get it, not going to laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, again, I think the thing with Chesterton when I first came across him in books like this was I thought about William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, who famously said, "Why should the devil have all the best tunes?" And I thought about Chesterton. The Chesterton and Belloc together, sort of saying, "Why should the devil have all the best jokes?" Right? But basically, the joie de vivre, joie de vivre is with the Christian, right? We're the ones who are naturally happy. We're the ones that are naturally laughing, right? And we see that in this book, and indeed everything Chesterton writes.
Well, I think it's true to the question of not laughing at it or not getting it or whatever. I think it's true that you have to have a little bit of experience of life to appreciate his insights. If you've lived an utterly sheltered life and now you're reading this for the first time as a college freshman or something, and have you seen sin on the street? Probably not so much. I mean, it's
You're more sheltered than me. I first read Chesterton when I was 19, and I'd seen quite a lot of.
That's what I'm saying. I read him when I was 18, and I had already seen too much for my age. Really,
exactly. So yeah,
that's why I can think he's funny.
Yeah,
that's my point. My point is that sometimes we had someone come to us recently wanted an annotated Orthodoxy to use in his classes at college level classes. And I can see how some of the historical allusions and things are helpful. There's notes in this too. But no, he wanted to go much further than that. And then I thought, well, yeah, you kind of have to have seen a thing or two to find him funny. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm not boasting. I'm just.
And also not. I think the key thing is not to be the maniac of this title, which means not to take yourself too seriously, even if you've made big mistakes, which I had certainly done by the time I started reading Chesterton. That they're not to take yourself too seriously, right? And that's the key thing here. If you're proud, then that's very easy. That pride, the self-confidence can shrivel into despair. Right?
Yes.
Because you take yourself too seriously, that basically I'm bad, everything stinks, get me out of here, which might be suicide, right? Whereas if you don't take yourself too seriously, you can see, well, that was dumb, that was stupid, how ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
You allow humor to penetrate your pride. And through humor, you rediscover humility. And I think humor and humility as a juxtaposition really do encapsulate part of the secret of Chesterton's success.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Did he say that around that the angels fell because of gravity?
He said the angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. The devil fell by the force of his own gravity, which encapsulates the whole thing. Yeah.
Yep. Very good.
The devil takes himself far too seriously. That's the problem.
Yeah, I want to, on page 20, the bottom of that paragraph, top of the page, again, this is something very Chestertonian. I mean that as all thoughts and theories were once judged by whether they tended to make a man lose his soul, that is, do good, avoid evil, avoid sin, be charitable, and so on. So for our present purpose, all modern thoughts and theories may be judged by whether they tend to make a man lose his wits. He's not talking about making you holy here. He's saying, you want to be sane?
Right.
Right, exactly. It's not about losing your soul, it's about losing your sanity, basically.
Well, who was it that said the saints are the most sane people on earth? Who said that?
I said that.
The saints are the most sane people.
I wasn't the first, I'm sure. But...
Well,
anyway.
I also said it. I wasn't the second. But I was about sanity and sanctity ultimately being synonymous, and I think that's the whole point of the central point of Shakespeare's King Lear. That sanity and sanctity are the same thing, even though the world thinks it's madness. So this is the paradox.
Well, and on page 21, toward the top there, Chesterton says point blank, imagination does not breed insanity. A lot of people think that having a fanciful imagination puts you in league with the fairies, and the pixies and all of that. And he's saying, no, it's not imagination that breeds insanity. It's exactly what does breed insanity is reason, meaning a self-referential, tightly locked down, hubristic reason.
Well, again, the poets do not go mad, but chess players do. That's the whole point. This is not reason as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, and Aquinas would understand it. Logos, ratio. This is basically the worship of reason, rationalism, and specifically here, logic. Right? That the only thing which is ultimately rational is that which can be proven through logic. Chess is the perfect metaphor for that, because chess is nothing but logic. And if that's all, if you believe the whole of the cosmos is nothing but logic, you go mad.
This is somewhat apropos, but it's something which irks me and therefore has been on my mind. I was in an interview some weeks ago discussing the difference between the extraordinary form of the Mass and the ordinary form done in a traditional way, with the priests facing the people for the readings in which God's word is spoken to them, and then facing the Lord for the sacrifice. Because in extraordinary form, the priest is facing away from the people for the whole Mass, readings, as well as Eucharistic sacrifice. And his argument was, we must face the Lord because the Mass is worship, and therefore it's towards God. Well, because he defined worship in that way, in a very rational way, he couldn't see that our listening to God, sitting at his feet like Mary did, is also a form of worship. But because he gave himself a very limited, narrow idea of what worship is, and then he said, well, you can't face the people for the reading because that's not worship.
I think that's what Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, prior to that, in Spirituality, was trying to get at, about the healthy cross-fertilization between the ordinary and extraordinary forms of the Mass. I know a priest who's a priest of the Pius X Society, and he said to me, I don't see any reason why the faithful, the laity, cannot be saying the whole of the Paternoster, the whole of the Our Father with me, rather than just the said Liberos Nos Amalo at the end, which is what traditional Mass says. The point is, even, should we say, hardline trads such as Pius X Society priests are quite open to an authentic reform. Right?
Some very small segment, I would say yes. I mean, I've dealt with the other large segment.
Well, I think we've only gone on this tangent too long, obviously, but I think for as long as traditionalists are being ghettoized by persecution, they're going to circle the wagons. I mean, that's psychologically what's going to happen, and that's exactly what Benedict's motu proprio was, right? To bring them into the fold. Let's be as one flock here. talk to each other, love each other, listen to each other, you know, and now, because of the latest attacks, they've circled the wagons again. I mean, it's going to happen, you know.
Yeah. That's a reason, but not an excuse.
And no, it's a mitigating circumstance.
Well, I'd like to go back to this idea of if we may, of reason run amok, because on the top of page 22 he ends the paragraph with, I think this just sums it up. The poet only asks to get his head into the heavens. It is the logician who seeks to get the heavens into his head, and it is his head that splits.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and I thought highlighted brilliant. And again, it reminds me of that story which we spoke about a couple of weeks ago about Saint Augustine, you know, walking along the beach, and he sees the child trying to put the ocean into a hole in the sand, and he says, "What are you trying to do?" And he's trying to put the ocean into this hole. And he says, "We can't do that. The ocean's far too big." And then the child says, "Well, that's about the same as trying to put the mystery of the Trinity into your head." Right? The whole idea that something doesn't exist unless it fits inside the finite cranium that we have, you know, is obviously absurd. And that's what Chesterton, with his customary brilliance, puts it perfectly there.
And when our arguments about whether it's the Mass or anything else, when our arguments become so rigid that we can't really listen to what anybody else has to say and consider it on its merits, that's because we've put way too much stock in what we think we've managed to already fit into our head. And we think we understand, and we think it all fits together so beautifully. So why would I listen to anybody else? You know, and now you've closed yourself off from the beauty, really, of the symphonic whole of all of these people's apprehension of the truth. Now, granted, what you said about Aleister Crowley and Chesterton not being willing to debate, yes, okay, you're not going to debate certain people who are not of goodwill and are so twisted in their minds. But I'm talking about, we're one church here. We're all Catholics. You know, if we stop listening to each other, we're in trouble.
Of course, the model for this is not just Thomas Aquinas, he's the best known, but the entire scholasticism of the Middle Ages really began with Peter Lombard, who would quote these sentences from the Fathers of the Church, which are apparently contradictory. And so the great theologians, of which Thomas was the greatest, would have a thesis, you know, whether God exists or something like that. You know, on the one hand, here's three people who say he doesn't, and here's what their reasons. But here's three people who oppose those three. Now here's what I say. But he doesn't give his answer until he's been fair to present the opposite position that he can then synthesize. Yeah.
And even as brilliant as he is, he can't fit it all in his head either.
No,
you know?
I think the key thing is here, and I think there's a paradox. I think Chester's trying to get at it here. You know, we talk about going through the wardrobe, right? But there's a wonderful Evening War after his conversion said, I'm going to paraphrase, hopefully not too badly, that the conversion is like stepping across the chimney piece from from a looking glass world where everything is an absurd caricature into the real world that God made, and thence begins the delicious process of exploring everything anew. There's two things here. There is the world outside the church, which is actually much smaller than the church. That's the irony, right? And you can encapsulate and say, look, these errors are wrong, and you can show that they're wrong. And the church has done that. Church has shown all the heresies are wrong. But once you go through that chimney piece or through that wardrobe into the church itself, you enter something much larger. You go further up and further in, and that's the realm of mystery, which is actually bigger than your head.
Yes.
Outside, it's not bigger than your head, because these are all stupid ideas that people have made that we can refute through reason. Once you enter the realm of mystery, you're moving into a whole different dimension.
That's a really interesting image.
Well, I'm going to let you folks decide where you want to go. I've got passages highlighted. Although actually, the next after the bit you've just 22, the next I have is 29. But I mean, feel free to.
Wow, 6 whole pages you didn't have anything to say?
Well, only because you can't highlight every page in the book if you're teaching it. I mean, you can't. You got to be selective.
This is just an aside here. He talks at great length about insanity and mental disturbance and even suicide, and he has a lot of very sharp, smart things to say about these things, especially the way people with their own minds can box themselves into these corners.
Right.
Right. But I just want to say, coming from a family with a lot of lunatics in it, literally, I mean, I'm not using the word lightly at all. I want anyone who might be reading it with that kind of background to not like emotionally shut down when he goes into this, because his points are valid even if they're not the complete picture of the person in the lunatic asylum or the person who commits suicide. I mean, I just felt like I had to say that, because I really, those parts of the book I struggled with the most, simply because of my own family history.
Right.
And I just had to kind of put out that qualification, like, don't let that stop you, because he's.
Chesterton says, that he was there. He was there. I mean, he'd thought back so far beyond materialism itself. He talks about this in the book. We'll get to it at some point. But that he thought back to the roots of things to such a degree that he began to doubt even materialism. Right. So taking the fundamental ideas of people such as Schopenhauer, that we don't even know that matter exists. Right. It could just be a product of our mind. The only thing we actually know for sure is that we think. Right. In other words, or not just we think, you can't be sure of anybody else. Right. I think. And this reductionism, there's nothing but primal subjectivity, was where Chesterton found himself. He took everything back to the absolute basics and thought, well, I don't even know that matter exists. I can't prove that even, right?
Right. I'm only saying that mental illness takes other forms besides this kind of thinking yourself into some absurdity, and
Yeah, but it wasn't just absurdity. I mean, it led to depression. I mean, it led to where a lot of the decadents end up with thoughts of suicide or drug abuse or basically self-destruction.
Yeah.
So even with Chesterton, it led to places that you would call mental illness. So it's not as if that he doesn't understand. I think that as a young man, in his late teens, early 20s, he was there.
Yeah, I know. I'm only saying that sometimes the mental illness is the thing that causes this reduction in thinking, not the other way around. When you see it manifested in a very young person, this is not because they've got too much schooling and they've been reading Schopenhauer and they've been no, there's something broken in their minds that causes this weird circular logic and ruminating and everything, and to try to break through it. I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of it, and it seems to run in families. There seems to be a hereditary.
This would be a physical mental illness, not should we say a psychological one, which is a question of angst caused by bad philosophy. This is something which is broken as regards.
Yes, and so I just and I just want to say as a qualification, that's not the kind of mental illness he's dealing with. He is dealing with this other thing, this rumination into madness that these people have done, and taken themselves off the cliff. And it's valid to think about that, because that is a modern. I mean, I think one reason why we have way more mental illness than ever before is precisely because modern philosophy has aided and abetted it.
Yes.
Right. But so that's why it's worth taking it apart and thinking about it. I'm just saying, anyway, it's not the whole picture of what constitutes mental illness or how people end up there.
Right.
Anyway.
And he is going to address certain modern philosophical positions in this chapter, and criticize them. The basis is going to be that it's not sane, it's not sanity. And so why does he say that? I think I want to just quote a couple of things to make it clear here. Page 14.
14.
Page 24, I'm sorry, 24.
Okay.
Just below that paragraph, 4 lines in, he says, because he uses a circle as an image for insanity or for narrowness of mind. He says, a small circle is quite as infinite as a large circle. You go round and round and round, right? But though it is quite as infinite, it is not so large. In the same way, the insane explanation is quite as complete as the sane one. The insane is as complete as the sane, but it's not so large. And then a few lines below that, we may say that the strongest and most unmistakable mark of madness is this combination between a logical completeness and a spiritual contraction. And then finally, in the bottom of page 25, talking about the paranoid here, how much happier would you be? How much more of you there would be if the hammer of a higher God could smash your small cosmos, who thinks everything's himself, right? Scattering the stars like spangles and leave you in the open, free like other men to look up as well as down. So this idea is, it's not the explanation of some of these people are not complete in a sense. It's just they don't embrace enough.
They're too small.
Yeah. In fact, that might, the word ideology is used a lot, and I'm not sure I could define it, but one approach would be to say, you've got this one idea, and that you make everything fit around it, but you don't open other ideas. So that's ideology as opposed to philosophy.
Right, and that's why we say it's reductionist. It reduces reality to what fits and just discards the reality that doesn't fit. And now it becomes a circular logic, such that if you disagree, you're like Marxism, well, you disagree because you're bourgeois. And so and it's just like, wait, what? You can't get out of the circle now.
I know. I'm actually thinking, just playing with the word here, because it's not etymology, but it's just wordplay, which obviously Chesterton loves doing. The word ideology, right? You got idea and logos, right? That basically the logos is reduced to the idea. The one idea becomes logos, right?
That's right.
That's the problem. I'd even go even further and say the id at the beginning of it, that ultimately it becomes nothing but you, and your own perspective of things.
You want 29, but I got one. We're almost finished this session. But before we embark on the actual philosophies he's going to criticize, I want to say one more thing on principle by which he's going to criticize them. On page 27, 6 lines down. Now, as I explained in the introduction, I've determined in these early chapters to give not so much a diagram of a doctrine as some pictures of a point of view. Again, this is also his alliteration. You'll find that a lot. Diagram of a doctrine, pictures, point of view. And then below that, these modern thinkers, they all have exactly that combination we've noted, the combination of expansive and exhaustive reason with a contracted common sense. And that's what you have to combine, reason and common sense.
Absolutely.
Any last words? I think we should conclude that.
Yeah, if I can just go to page 29, because I just want the one I just noticed after talking about the chimney piece and the wardrobe, and that once you enter the church, that whole world of mystery opens up, and that first new paragraph, or only new paragraph on page 29, spiritual doctrines do not actually limit the mind as do materialistic denials. In other words, that basically the teachings of the church actually broaden the mind. They allow us to experience things that are far beyond anything that any materialist denial or affirmation can reach.
Of course, if it's just fantasy and projection, then you don't want to expand your mind to take in falsehood as well as truth.
Yeah, but I mean, broaden as into going through that keyhole. Chesterton uses elsewhere here the Apostles' Creed as being a key, right? That once you've gone through that keyhole, you're entering something, a whole understanding of the cosmos the Christian understanding of the cosmos, which is immensely larger and therefore broader, not broad in the reductionist sense of ecumenism, but broader in the truth sense of the fullness of reality.
Vivian, any last word?
No.
No? Okay. So we'll begin, though, next time on page 27, because that really is a, what do you call it, a division in the chapter. Take first the more obvious case of materialism. So that's what he's going to do.
Right.
All right. See you all next session. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at formedbookclub.ignatius.com.